A billionaire secretly followed his maid one night, and what he saw changed him forever. He was rich, powerful, feared. She was quiet, invisible, poor. Every evening she walked out of his mansion, carrying a bag. And one night, curiosity got the better of him. He followed her, thinking he'd catch her doing something wrong. But what he discovered that night didn't just surprise him, it broke him and remade him. This isn't just a story about a billionaire and his maid. It's about what happens when you finally see someone, not with your eyes, but with your heart. Everyone in City knew the name Henry Oseni, billionaire, hotel tycoon, cold, brilliant, untouchable. But inside his glass mansion on Queens Drive, there was one person who moved like a shadow. His maid, Grace. Grace was always early, always quiet. She spoke softly, never looked anyone in the eye, and wore the same 2 dresses every week. She didn't complain. She didn't gossip. She cleaned, cooked, and vanished before sundown. At first, Henry barely noticed her, but one evening changed everything. At 5:45 p.m., the sun hung low, spilling gold light into the hallway. As Henry walked past the stairwell, he saw her, Grace, standing by the front door, fixing the straps of 2 nylon bags. She didn't notice him watching. One bag seemed filled with food, the other with papers. Where was she going with them? Why did she always leave before dark? And what secrets were hidden inside those bags? He stepped closer. Grace. She jumped. Yes, sir? You're leaving already? Yes, sir. I finished everything. What's inside the bags? She hesitated. Just some food and documents. For? She looked down. It's personal, sir. Henry frowned. You've been leaving early almost every day. She nodded. Yes, sir. No explanation, no excuses. Just yes, sir. He said nothing more. He just watched her walk out of the gate, her back straight, her steps quick, her bags tight against her sides. That night, Henry couldn't focus. He had board meetings, contracts, hotel staff problems, but none of it could quiet his thoughts. What kind of maid carried legal-looking documents in a worn tote? What kind of maid didn't ask for help even when her shoes were falling apart? He opened her employee file. Clean, no red flags. But something wasn't adding up. Grace was hiding something, and by the time the clock hit midnight, Henry Oseni, man who never chased anything, had made up his mind. Tomorrow, he would follow her, not with anger, not with pride, but with a question burning in his chest. Who is this woman I let clean my house, but never really saw? Henry wasn't used to following people. People followed him. But that Friday evening, Henry sat behind the wheel of his black SUV, a plain cap pulled low and dark sunglasses hiding his eyes. He didn't need a driver, not tonight. Hands firm on the steering wheel, he waited, his silence saying more than words ever could. Tonight he would follow her himself. From behind the tinted glass, he watched as Grace stepped out of the compound exactly at 5:55 p.m., her 2 bags in hand. Same dress, same steady walk. She didn't take a cab. She didn't wave down a bike. She walked, street after street, her slippers slapped against the dusty pavement. She turned corners with the ease of someone who had walked this route 100 times. And Henry followed, slowly, carefully, always keeping his distance. They passed bright shops, noisy bikers, hawkers shouting at passers-by, and women fanning the smoke of roasted corn. But Grace never looked left or right. She kept walking, her face calm, her pace steady, her eyes fixed ahead. Finally, she boarded a yellow bus with chipped paint, its conductor clinging to the open door. Henry followed in silence. His black SUV slid through the chaos of city traffic like a silent hunter, his gaze never leaving the bus. The ride twisted through roads Henry hadn't driven in years. When the bus finally stopped, it was in a neighborhood he remembered only too well. Rough, crowded, full of broken houses and restless noise. He raised an eyebrow. Grace stepped off. Henry's car slowed to a stop a few meters away. He watched as she walked past a block of crumbling buildings, turned into a narrow street, and slipped through the rusted gate of a low-fenced compound. Above it, a faded sign read, "House of Second Chances. Free classes, free meals, free hope." Henry frowned. What is this? Through the cracked window of the center, he leaned forward, watching. Inside, adults sat on wooden benches, notebooks in hand. Market women with weary faces, men in dusty boots, all of them staring at one figure at the front. Grace! She wasn't sweeping or scrubbing. She was teaching. On the blackboard, in big chalk letters, she had written, "Today's lesson, filling out hospital forms." Henry's mouth parted slightly. He watched as she moved across the room, her smile warm, her voice patient, her eyes alive. She stopped beside a woman and guided her hand gently across the page. The woman's face lit up with relief. That smile, he had never seen it before. Not in his house, not in the marble hallways, not behind the broom or beside the mop. This wasn't a maid. This was something else. Something more. And for the first time in years, Henry felt a lump rise in his throat. He stayed in the car for over an hour, unable to look away. Grace moved around the small classroom with quiet authority, her voice calm but commanding. She repeated words patiently until her students understood, and when one elderly man struggled to pronounce pharmacy, she knelt beside him, smiling. "Say it with me again, Papa Tunde. Pharmacy." The man grinned like a child who had just taken his first step. Henry felt something stir in his chest. When the class ended, Grace didn't leave. She opened one of the nylon bags she had carried from his mansion. Inside were a few loaves of bread, sachets of water. One by one, she handed them out. First to the old, then to the women, then to the others. A woman with a baby on her back hugged her and whispered, "God bless you, Grace." Henry swallowed hard. He looked at her clothes, worn. Her shoes, nearly torn at the sides. Her own food, barely enough. Yet she gave as though she had everything, and suddenly he felt ashamed. In his mansion, he had a pantry overflowing with food he never touched, closets filled with clothes he hadn't worn in years, a gym he didn't use, rooms he never entered, and outside his gate this girl, this maid, was feeding strangers with the little she had. No complaints, no noise, no cameras, no one clapping for her. Just love, quiet, steady, powerful love. His chest felt heavy, not from guilt alone, but because in that moment Henry knew something had shifted. He no longer wanted to simply know her secret. He wanted to know her, all of her. And maybe, just maybe, he was ready to face something he hadn't felt in years. Admiration. Henry didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, staring at the faint flicker of the lamp beside his leather chair. The image of Grace teaching, her hand raised to the chalkboard, joy shining in her eyes, kept replaying in his mind. This wasn't just kindness. This was something deeper. He pulled open a drawer and took out a thin folder marked Staff. Grace. The rest of the name had smudged. He flipped it open. Grace Joseph, age 25. No emergency contact listed. No next of kin. Just the basics. Hired through a cleaning agency. Worked in 2 other homes before this. No complaints. No education history. No references. Just a clean record. Too clean. Henry reached for his tablet and opened his browser. He typed in the name of the center he had seen earlier. House of Second Chances. A plain, outdated page appeared. Free adult classes, free meals, run by volunteers. There was a small donation link. And then he saw her, Grace in a faded green blouse, standing beside a group of adult students, a marker in hand, laughing. Her eyes were bright, her arms stretched open like a teacher calling her children close. Beneath the photo, a quote, "We don't need to be rich to make a difference. We just need to care enough to try." Grace Joseph. Henry leaned back in his chair. It felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted. He had walked past her 100 times, sat at his dining table while she served him silently, crossed paths in the hallway without ever asking who she was outside his walls. And yet, she was building something no one noticed. He whispered into the quiet, "Why didn't you ever ask me for help?" No answer, of course, only silence. But now Henry didn't want silence. He wanted her story. He wanted to understand how a girl with almost nothing could live like she had everything. And maybe, just maybe, learn how to live like that too. The sun rose over Queen's Drive, painting the walls of Henry's mansion in warm gold. but he didn't feel the warmth. He sat at the breakfast table, untouched tea beside him, staring at the kitchen door. Grace was inside, moving silently as usual. The soft clinking of plates, the sound of a drawer opening, the smell of fried plantain. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal. She walked out carrying his tray. "Good morning, sir." He looked up. "Sit." She paused, unsure if she had heard him right. "Sir, please," he said, softer this time. "Sit." Grace slowly placed the tray on the table and sat at the edge of the opposite chair, eyes down. Henry picked up his spoon, then stopped. "I followed you yesterday." The words landed like a drop of water in still glass. Grace's hands froze. "I saw the center," he added. "I saw you teach. I saw you share your food. I saw everything." A long silence. Then slowly she looked up, eyes wide, afraid. "I wasn't stealing," she said quickly. "I swear, sir, I never took anything from your house." "I know," Henry replied gently. "I never thought you did." She blinked. "Then, why did you follow me?" "Because I couldn't understand how someone with so little could give so much." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't speak. "You never asked for help," he continued. "Not once. Not even when your shoes were broken or when your salary was delayed that month." "I didn't think it was my place," she said quietly. "People like me, we're taught to just manage." He looked at her, something soft flickering in his eyes. "What if someone wants to help, not because they pity you, but because they admire you?" She bit her lip. "Why the center?" he asked. Grace finally spoke, her voice low but steady. "My father couldn't read. When my mother fell sick, he couldn't fill out the hospital forms on time. The delay meant she wasn't treated quickly enough. We buried her because of that. That center, it's for people like him." Henry swallowed hard. He hadn't expected that, and in that moment something inside him cracked. This girl wasn't just giving, she was fighting, and somehow, without meaning to, she had shaken something deep inside him. Henry stood in the hallway holding his coffee, watching the clock tick toward 6 p.m. for the first time since she started working there. Grace didn't rush out. She was still in the kitchen humming softly. He listened to her voice, low, peaceful, almost like a lullaby. Something about it felt healing. When she stepped out to mop the floor, he finally spoke. "I read your father's story. Again. I couldn't stop thinking about it." She turned, surprised. "You remembered?" "I couldn't forget." They stood there, neither rushing, neither sure what came next. Henry placed the mug on the side table. "Grace, why didn't you ever ask me for help? I would have listened." She smiled just a little. "Because people like you don't usually see people like me. And I didn't want to be pitied." Henry swallowed hard. "That day, when I saw you teaching those adults, it did something to me. You gave them dignity. I gave them what I didn't have," she said quietly. He stepped closer. "You've done more with your small salary than most people do with millions. You've created a home without walls." Grace looked away. "But it's still not enough." Henry tilted his head. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "There are so many more out there. People like my father, who hide their shame because they can't read. Mothers who lose their babies because they can't fill hospital forms. All because no one ever taught them simple things. English, forms, directions." Henry stared at her. "So what do you want to do?" She finally looked at him, eyes steady. "I want to build something bigger. A network of small learning centers. Places that restore pride. Places where nobody feels stupid or forgotten." He nodded slowly. "You have the vision. I have the resources." She blinked. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, maybe we don't have to do this separately." Silence. Then a soft smile crept across her face, and for the first time he saw it. Not the maid, not the teacher, but the leader. The next few weeks passed like a quiet wind. Grace still swept the marble floors. She still watered the plants, folded towels, and served Mr. Henry tea at 7:30 a.m. sharp. But something between them had changed. He lingered in the kitchen longer, She no longer avoided his eyes. One Thursday morning, Henry walked in early and saw her at the table. Not cleaning, but writing. Books and papers were scattered around her. Her glasses slid down her nose, and her lips moved silently as she read. He paused at the door. "I didn't know you wore glasses," he said softly. She jumped. "Oh, I didn't hear you, sir." He raised his hand gently. "Relax, what are you working on?" She hesitated, then held up a thick file. "My final project," she said. "I'm completing my diploma in adult education." Henry blinked. "You're in school?" She nodded. "Evenings after the center. It's been tough, but I'm almost done." He stepped forward. "May I?" She passed him the file. The cover read, "Bridging the Gap: How Adult Literacy Restores Dignity to Low-Income Communities." He opened it. It was detailed, powerful, passionate. Diagrams, personal interviews, field notes from the classroom. One quote from a student stopped him. "I used to walk past hospitals in pain because I couldn't fill a form. Now I walk in with my head high." Henry felt something tighten in his chest. He closed the file gently. "You know," he said, "I've read proposals from top executives that didn't carry half this truth." Grace blushed. "I'm only trying to tell their story." "No," he said softly but firmly. "You're telling our story, all of us who forgot how to truly see people." She looked up, surprised. Henry sat down beside her. "You don't just teach words, Grace. You return people to themselves." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. But the silence wasn't awkward. It was full of respect, full of understanding, and something else that neither of them wanted to name yet. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of it. Saturday came with rain. The sky was gray. Thunder grumbled quietly above the city. Most people stayed indoors, but Grace still left the house by 5:45 p.m., holding her umbrella and her usual bags. Henry stood by the window watching her go. He didn't follow her this time. He didn't have to. He already knew where she was going. Instead, he walked to the guest room where she kept her things, the small corner of the house that belonged to her. He paused at the door. He had never entered before. This wasn't a rich man's mansion room. It was a servant's space. No air conditioner, a single bed, a wooden shelf. It was simple, clean, tidy, almost too quiet. On the table was a framed picture. An old woman with kind eyes. He picked it up. Her mother, he assumed. It felt like he'd just entered a holy place. A space built not with bricks, but with hope. She had never shown him this side of her. She'd never opened this door. Yet here he was, sitting in the center of her quiet storm. That evening, when she returned soaked from the rain, he met her at the door. "You came back soaked," he said gently, holding out a dry towel. She looked surprised. "Thank you." He handed it over but didn't walk away. "Grace, if you had one wish, just one, what would it be?" She paused. "To create a place," she whispered, "where no one ever feels too small to be seen." Henry nodded slowly. "And what if I told you? I'd like to help you build it." Tears filled her eyes, not because he offered, but because for once someone believed. Monday morning came, but the air in the mansion felt different. Henry waited at the breakfast table, not for food, but for her. When Grace finally came in with his tray, she looked calm, but her eyes told another story. Tired, torn. He motioned for her to sit. "I meant what I said, Grace," he said quietly. "Let me help you build it. The learning center, the vision, everything." She didn't respond immediately. She placed the tray down and sat across from him, fingers folded in her lap. "I know you did," she said softly. "I can fund it. I can bring in partners, teachers, volunteers. We can create 10 centers, maybe more. You don't have to carry all this alone anymore." Still, she was silent. Henry leaned forward. "Why aren't you saying anything?" She looked down at her hands, then up at him. "Because my answer isn't yes." He blinked. "What?" Her voice trembled a little. "I'm afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of being swallowed." She tried to explain. "My whole life I fought to be seen. Not as someone to be rescued, but as someone capable. I've built the center slowly, stone by stone, meal by meal, lesson by lesson. And now If I say yes, it will no longer be just mine." Henry leaned back, the words settling like dust in the room. She continued, "What you're offering is beautiful, generous, but I don't want to become someone else's project. I want to build this dream and still recognize myself inside it." Henry exhaled deeply. He hadn't expected that. He thought she'd be thrilled, grateful, ready. Instead, she was guarded, honest, brave. He nodded slowly. "Okay, so what do you want?" Grace's answer was quiet. "Let me think. Let me pray. Let me breathe." Henry stood, his voice kind. "I'll wait." As she left the room, Henry realized something. This wasn't about money, or buildings, or even dreams. It was about trust, and trust took time. The house was quieter than usual. Days passed, but Grace didn't mention the proposal again. She still did her chores, still smiled gently, still left in the evenings with her bags. But between her and Henry, something had changed. No more long talks at the dining table. No more tea shared in the morning. No more questions about dreams. One Friday morning, she knocked gently on the door to his study. Henry looked up from his desk. She stood there with her hands folded, a white envelope clutched tightly between them. "I've come to give my notice," she said quietly. 2 weeks from now." Henry straightened in his chair, surprise flashing across his face. "You're leaving?" She nodded. "I've been offered a part-time job at a school," she said. "And I want to give more time to the center." Henry stared at the envelope. "Is it because of what I offered?" "No," she said gently. "It's because of what you made me believe I could do." He looked at her closely. She wasn't running away. She was stepping into her purpose. "You changed how I saw myself, sir," she continued. "For the first time, I started to dream out loud, and I want to protect that voice." Henry stood slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. "You don't have to go," he said. "I know," she replied. "I won't stop you," he said quietly. "But I'll miss you." She smiled, eyes glistening. "I'll miss you too." The next 2 weeks were soft and strange. She still made his tea, still wiped the glass windows. But now she walked with a certain lightness, a certainty. And Henry? He watched her like a man memorizing the sun before sunset. One evening, the night before her final day, Henry knocked softly on her door. Grace opened it slowly. He handed her another envelope, thicker, sealed. "These are letters," he said quietly. "From me. From the heart. Recommendations, funding notes, and one last message. Open it after you leave." Her hands trembled as she received it. "Thank you," she whispered. But neither of them said goodbye, because something inside both of them knew. This wasn't the end. It was only a pause. It had been 2 months since Grace walked out of Henry Orsini's mansion for the last time. He still remembered the sound of her footsteps as she left. Soft but sure. No bitterness. No tears. Just quiet dignity. The house felt colder now. Too quiet. He had grown used to her humming in the kitchen, her slippers against the tile, her voice greeting him gently every morning. And now, silence. Until one Thursday evening an invitation arrived. It came in a cream-colored envelope, hand-delivered. No sender written on it. Inside was a single card. House of Second Chances. Special fundraiser and literacy night. "You are warmly invited." Henry stared at the card, stunned. He hadn't spoken to Grace since she left. Yes, he had supported her, anonymously. The donation, the grant letter, the laptop for her classroom. She never knew it came from him, but somehow she still invited him. The night arrived. Henry wore a simple gray suit, no tie, no driver. He wanted to walk into that place as a man, not as a billionaire. When he reached the center, he froze. It was beautiful. The old rusted gate had been painted blue. Lanterns hung from strings across the courtyard. Children ran around with paper flowers. Inside, people filled the benches. Students, mothers, elderly men in native cloth, school children with dusty feet. And in the center of it all, Grace. She wore a flowing cream dress. Simple, elegant, confident. Her eyes found his across the room. And she smiled, the kind of smile that said, "You came. The program began. A small girl stepped forward and read a poem, for the first time ever, in English. The crowd clapped loudly. An elderly man shared how he had finally opened a bank account on his own. More applause. Then the host stepped forward. We would now like to invite our founder, our light, Miss Grace. The room erupted in cheers. Grace stepped forward, microphone in hand. I used to think people like me only cleaned floors, she began. But someone showed me that even maids can lead movements, that our small stories matter. Her gaze found Henry's, and to the man who saw me, even when I didn't see myself. Thank you. Henry felt a lump rise in his throat, and for the first time in years, he clapped not as a businessman, not as a patron, but as a man whose heart was moved. This wasn't just her victory, it was theirs. The event ended, but Henry didn't leave. He stood at the back of the learning center, watching her. Watching Grace speak with guests, hug her students, and gather empty plastic cups with the same hands that once scrubbed his kitchen sink. But now, she moved like a woman who finally knew who she was. And somehow that made Henry feel both proud and humbled. She eventually walked over to him. "You didn't have to come," she said softly, smiling. He returned the smile. "I had to. You invited me." Her eyes searched his face. "Was it you?" He didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Yes," he said quietly. "The donation, the laptop, the letters, the anonymous envelope, all of it. It was me." Grace's eyes softened. She didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She just nodded, like she already knew. "I didn't want you to feel bought," Henry added. "I wanted you to feel free. You gave me more than money," she said gently. "You gave me a mirror. You helped me see what I was capable of." Henry hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I'd like to offer you something else." He handed her a rolled certificate. Grace unrolled it slowly. Her breath caught. "Partnership. House of Second Chances, the Orsini Foundation. New program director, Miss Grace Joseph. Board seat. Full voting rights." She looked up, stunned. Henry's voice was steady. "I want to expand this all across the country, with your heart and my resources. I want to do it the right way, with you leading it." Her lips parted, but no words came, so he stepped closer. "This isn't charity. This is purpose, and I want to walk beside you." Her voice cracked. "Are you sure?" He smiled. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Then, softer still. "Also, I'd like to take you to dinner. Not as your boss, not as your partner, but as a man who sees you." Tears finally rolled down her cheeks. "I'd like that," she whispered. A few weeks later, the newly renovated center unveiled its new signboard. Bright, bold, beautiful. It read, "The Grace Joseph Literacy Center, where every name matters." And beneath, in smaller letters, "Co-founded by Henry Orsini and Grace Joseph. Changing lives, one voice at a time." As they stood hand in hand under the golden sky, Grace whispered, "I used to think people like me only served food." Henry turned, smiling at her. "Now people like you serve a nation." And together they walked back inside. The story that began with suspicion, ended with purpose, partnership, and a love deeper than words. Sometimes you don't need to have it all to make a difference. Grace was just a maid, yet her little became much, reminding us that true greatness is not measured by wealth or status, but by the kindness we show and the sacrifices we make for others. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to Folk Tales by Olivia for more emotional, dramatic, and unforgettable stories. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and keep watching.